Okay, let's stop sugarcoating. We are taking off the kitty gloves. This one is for you, Blizzard, because your fan base is just too damn nice and too damn complacent to tell you what you need to hear. You are bad at balancing for competitive play. Look, I love Overwatch. Most fun shooter I've played in years. This is why I have to take a step back and really break down just how much Blizzard is trying to spoil their own game. Before we start, just to give you a bit of perspective, I want to let you know I've been playing and viewing fighting games at a competitive level for about 3/4 of a decade. You may say, Overwatch isn't a fighting game. What's the relevance? Well, Overwatch is a character-driven competitive ecosystem, just like a fighting game. That means we can learn something from fighting games, so let's take a minute. In the fighting game community, patches are handled a bit more delicately when it comes to their effect on the competitive ecosystem. In the days before internet patches, the launch version of the game was the one you were stuck with, period. Unless you were lucky enough to play a series obsessed with going turbo year after year. This meant that players were stuck in the same competitive ecosystem for at least 1 year at a time, or even longer. If you thought a character was overpowered, you didn't have the option to go to your favorite message board and complain about balance. No, you had to learn how to deal with it, plain and simple. You simply had to learn to counter whatever you thought was overpowered. And guess what? It worked. You think Sagat is overpowered? Well, time to practice against Sagat for 2 months. If you're smart, you will figure it out. And they did. This was the competitive spirit. If something keeps beating you, you buckle down, do some hardcore research, and you practice every day. When fighting games started becoming online experiences, a few took advantage of the infrastructure and released frequent regular patches. Here comes the important part. When these patches became too frequent, the community reacted. They said, these are too many patches, you're stunting the growth of the metagame, please release patches less frequently. They were completely right to do so. When a developer overpatches their game, they steal away the player's opportunity to improve. You can't know if something is overpowered with only 2 to 3 months of play, you just can't. Competitive metagames develop more slowly than that. If a character is dominating early on in the scene, it's up to the player base to learn how to counter this, not bitch at the developer to make things easier for crybabies. When developers do this, they stunt a game's competitive growth, and the player base becomes softer as a result. Most fighting games patch about once a year these days in order to give one solid competitive season per patch version. This allows the metagame to develop in a healthy manner and gives players a chance to learn how to counter what they currently perceive as broken. Okay, so you're probably thinking, what does this have to do with Overwatch? Well, if you haven't noticed, Blizzard is practicing the exact opposite of that philosophy. Since launch, Overwatch has experienced constant rebalancing between numerous heroes. It has been so frequent, we have seen one hero, McCree, jump up and down from the lowest and highest spots of the tier list in just a couple months. What the hell is this? This game, barely out of its own infancy, has tweaked or reworked McCree, Widowmaker, Zenyatta, d.va, Roadhog, Soldier 76, Mercy, Hanzo, and Torbjorn on console. That is roughly a third of the cast. In a game this young, that's incredibly irresponsible. These characters have barely had time to sink into their competitive niche. Because of this, fewer and fewer players are dedicating massive amounts of time into the heroes that match their playstyles. Instead, players are investing a cursory amount of time into whichever characters are currently favored or ignored by the constant rebalancing. Some characters are steady as a rock, constantly used in all levels of play. Characters like Reinhardt and Lucio do their jobs exceptionally well and have been mostly unaffected by the balancing, so they are played at a disproportionate rate. A character like Pharah hasn't been changed at all since launch, but due to Blizzard constantly nerfing and buffing her counter picks, her playtime has fluctuated despite no direct changes. Then we have complete disasters like McCree and Widowmaker, who at any given time are either barely picked or picked constantly, frequently changing places between incredible and non-viable. When a character like d.va or Zenyatta is buffed, that isn't so bad. We want heroes to be usable, to have a place in the meta. But nerfing characters like McCree and Torbjorn just because they're good at their job and enough people on the internet bitch about it? That is asinine. The problem here is that Blizzard doesn't balance their game based on any sort of discernible design philosophy. The changes have been too rapid, too early, and too drastic to align with any sort of unified balance approach. No, we have the worst case scenario. Blizzard balances based on public opinion, and this is a huge problem. Let's focus on the story of Jesse McCree for just a moment. During the early beta stages of the game, McCree had no range cap, making him an incredibly dangerous threat at a range, able to even counter-snipe characters like Widow and Hanzo. Combine this with his flashbang and fan the hammer combo at close range, and McCree was a fairly strong choice at every range. So Blizzard reduced his range, turning him into more of a close mid-range threat, able to melt even tanks at a moment's notice. McCree's role had shifted from all-range everyman to a close-range powerhouse with mid-range options. McCree was able to whittle opponents down at mid-range and then absolutely obliterate them up close, making him a devastatingly good pick on either team. Many players took issue with this, citing that McCree was effective at too many things, decentralizing the metagame. Recent tournaments and competitive usage statistics added fire to this flame, for many high-level Overwatch players had simply adopted to having McCree always on their team, sometimes two at once. Never mind that these same teams almost always had a Reinhardt or a Mercy. Since McCree was the one doing the killing, he became public enemy number one. It did not take long for Blizzard to respond. Within weeks, McCree was nerfed hard. His fan the hammer damage dropped from 420 maximum to merely 270 maximum. McCree had gone from absolutely devastating at close range to absolutely embarrassing himself. McCree players quickly found themselves getting bullied by characters he once dominated. Roadhog and Reaper were now free to laugh in the cowboy's face as the backflanks he once guarded were now completely free. Many will immediately claim that McCree was never meant to melt tanks, and I can agree with that. But if we truly believe that, this means we must acknowledge that Blizzard made a balanced decision that made no sense in the overall metagame. McCree went from being good at mid and close range to being good at nothing. Now with the new patch, McCree is good again, but he's good at mid and long range, like his early beta incarnation. Looking at this trend begs the question, why? Why make a character who's good at long range be only good at mid and close range, then make him good at nothing, then make him good at mid and long range again? It's a circle. If Blizzard knew what they wanted McCree to be good at, they would have put him there in the first place. If Blizzard always wanted McCree to be the offensive sharpshooter, they would have balanced him around this idea from the start. They didn't. Blizzard has tossed McCree between multiple roles in the span of months, with no clear goal for his place in the meta. All of these changes have been based on public outcry and player trends, rather than a clear design philosophy. Instead of deciding how players should play the game, Blizzard is allowing the players to dictate how they shape the game. This may be good for business, keeping as many people happy as possible, but it's devastating for the competitive ecosystem. Nothing is concrete. Nothing lasts long enough for any real experimentation, and playstyles are being stunted before they can fully develop. Blizzard is sacrificing long-term competitive integrity for short-term fan satisfaction. People have noted that competitive players of other games have hesitated diving into full-time Overwatch play, and for good reason. Overwatch stands on a shaky competitive foundation where nothing is concrete and months of practice on one character can be undone by enough forum complaints. Even now we can see traces of Blizzard backpedaling their own decisions. During the public test region, Blizzard struggled between choosing the 30% damage boost for Mercy or the 50% damage boost for Mercy. I appreciate that they tested this change in the PTR first before making it live, but if you were going to change it back just because people complained in the PTR anyways, then why put it in the first place? People will always complain. That's what people do. There is going to be a usage surge in recently buffed characters. It's unavoidable. It's just how it happens. This surge is natural and should be allowed to deflate naturally. Players will naturally become better at countering characters the more common they are. All that is needed is a bit of practice and a lot of patience. The most egregious, heinous change of them all, however, is the console Torbjorn nerf. Torbjorn received a 30% damage reduction, a drastic nerf for even the most broken characters. The kicker here, though? Torbjorn isn't even broken. He's not even good. He's pretty mediocre, actually. Torbjorn's nerf is exclusive to console for a reason, because console players are known for having poor aim. Is this true? Yeah. But it's a poor excuse, especially considering that the turret is stationary. It doesn't move. If console players couldn't hit a stationary object, By that logic, they can't hit anything. Well, we know that isn't true, so what's the actual problem? Well, I actually play on console, so let me tell you. People on console have no fucking trouble picking Pharah or Junkrat and blowing your turret up, picking D.va and rushing it down with Defense Matrix up, picking Genji and picking it apart with Reflect and well-placed shurikens, or picking Reinhardt, walking up to it with the shield up and bashing your turret to bits. People have no problem doing that. People know how to stand behind a corner and strafe left and right, peek shooting at the turret. People know how to do this. There are only two ways for these turrets to get away with the ridiculous wins the way Blizzard describes. 1. Multiple Torbjorn stack, creating a multi-turret network. This strategy is going to be eliminated by the stack limit being patched into competitive play, so for all intents and purposes, that's not really a valid reason to nerf the character. 2. The other scenario where Torbjorn gets away with total murder is against unorganized solo queues that refuse to counterpick. That's not Torbjorn's fault. He's supposed to dominate against poorly organized teams. A Reinhardt and a couple Pharahs will absolutely destroy any turret composition. I have experienced this truth multiple times in competitive play with 6-player teams. But because console players at large have refused to adjust for this fact, Blizzard has appeased their complaints with a nerf instead of a few stiff words. Once again, a character is punished for doing his job well and now faces the possibility of being completely useless. Due to this being a console-only change, almost nobody in the community cares, despite perpetuating Blizzard's pattern for balancing based on public opinion. I point these things out because I truly enjoy Overwatch. I'd like to see Overwatch continue to thrive for competitive and casual audiences. I sincerely believe that if Blizzard continues with these frequent and drastic adjustments, they will soon lose the interest of more dedicated players. Most changes so far have either been harmless or necessary, like the buffs for poor old Zenyatta and D.va. These characters underperformed drastically and now fit into the metagame far more nicely. The banning of character stacks and competitive should bring a great boost to the metagame and character variety, but for every couple of beneficial adjustments, we can find evidence of Blizzard completely demolishing their own character's place in the metagame. So where does McCree fit in? Depends on Blizzard's mood, I guess, or even worse, the mood of the fan base.